At the will reading, my dad gave my sister $11 million and told me to go earn my own. Then Grandpa's lawyer stood up and read a secret he kept just for me. My mom started screaming. I did not cry. I did not ask why. I walked out into the salt air and let the storm do the yelling for me. Anger was not loud this time. It was clinical. I unlocked the office by the marina, flicked on the desk lamp, and opened the laptop. Blue light, password, dashboard. If they wanted me to disappear, I could honor the request with precision. First move, revoke access. The research permits lived under my account because I was the one who earned them. I pulled up the portal and watched the list bloom on the screen. Vessel operations, coastal sampling, hazardous materials handling dive authorizations. Each one a vein feeding their image. I moved through them like a surgeon. Disable, disable, disable. Not dramatic, just accurate. Second move, cancel logistics. The Foundation liked to think the ocean smiled for our last name. In reality, it smiled for the paperwork. I withdrew the berths we held at the harbor. I terminated the standing order with the ice supplier. I paused the fuel account and closed the maintenance ticket queue. If anyone tried to take the fleet out at dawn, they would find clipboards and closed gates. My phone started to shake with messages. Call me, you are being emotional. Do not do anything. You will regret. I put the phone face down. Regret is what you feel when you choose the wrong numbers. Tonight, I was balancing a sheet. I drafted one email to operations as of midnight. Environmental compliance falls outside my supervision. Proceeding without oversight will invalidate data. Calm, factual, lethal. I copied it to the board, then archived the thread. I did not wait for replies. Power is not waiting. The water outside was black glass chopped by wind. It looked like how I felt surface chaos deep order. For years I had called my silence weakness. Tonight it read like savings. Years of holding still meant I had interest I could spend in a single hour. People assume strength is noise. They forget another kind exists. The kind you build when you cannot run and cannot fight and still choose to stand. It is the strength of the overlooked. You learn the schedule of every tide. You memorize who signs what and where the real keys live. You keep receipts others throw away because you know one day you will need proof. They called me quiet. I was taking inventory. I thought about how every decision in that house came wrapped in a word they loved: optics. Donate here for optics. Sit there for optics. Post this line, wear that dress, smile with teeth. Optics. Love was just a press release with better lighting. I used to play along because I hoped good work would outlast good spin. All it did was teach them how much they could withdraw from me without penalty. The cursor blinked. I opened the grants ledger. I kept on my own drive. Line by line, I highlighted the gaps I had covered. Emergency engine rebuild 1 autumn paid from my fellowship. Dive training for my sister when she said she wanted to lead. Field stipends I slipped to interns so they would not quit. I did not copy the board this time. I did not need applause. I needed memory. I saved the file to an external drive and ejected it like a ritual. Another message lit the screen pickup. Now we can talk about this. It sounded like a receipt printed without a total. Talking had always been how they delayed payment. I turned off notifications and kept working. I logged into the data servers and set permissions to read only. That would keep the raw samples safe from edits. I unlinked the auto posts that translated our research into pretty slogans. The ocean does not need slogans. It needs numbers that do not lie. A wave slammed the pilings and the whole office trembled. I steadied my coffee and thought about the old lesson no one teaches out loud. Sometimes survival looks like passivity from the outside. A house without bars still has rules. You keep the peace to avoid the cost. You make yourself small so you do not trigger the trap. Over time, you start believing small is natural. It is not. Small is a position someone else assigned you because it served them. Tonight, I stepped back to my full size. The room did not shrink me. The screen did not argue. I printed a single page and left it on the desk for my self-inventory of boundaries effective immediately. Do not answer messages after midnight. Do not accept unpaid responsibilities packaged as love. Do not apologize for protecting your work. Simple lines, new policy. I shut down the office, then turned the laptop back on. One more task. I opened a fresh document and wrote the sentence no one had ever said to me: in that house you are not the problem because you see the problem. I read it once, twice, and felt something unlock. Not relief, alignment. By the time the storm thinned to a hard rain, the foundation could not launch a dinghy without tripping over my absence. They would call it sabotage. I called it closing an account that had been overdrawn for years. On the walk to the dock, I passed the hulls and ropes and rusted cleats that had carried my life. The wind tasted metallic. I stood there for a minute and let the rain soak through my hair, my jacket, my old habit of apologizing. Somewhere behind me, my phone buzzed again, then again, growing frantic. I did not turn around. Anger was quiet now. Clarity took its seat. This was not revenge. This was accounting. And for the first time in a long time, the numbers added up in my favor. I woke up before sunrise, the sky, the color of dull silver, and made coffee strong enough to taste like resolve. The marina was still boats bobbing like punctuation marks, waiting for meaning. I took my mug outside, breathing the salt air that used to smell like duty. Now it smelled like distance, like freedom wrapped in brine. The quiet should have felt lonely, but it didn't. It felt earned. By mid-morning, I was scrolling through the Foundation's public feed, an endless carousel of smiling faces and press captions. My sister posing with coral samples I collected. My father quoted in an article about sustainability he never practiced. My mother framed against the horizon labeled "The Heart of Carter Marine." The word heart made me laugh. I remembered funding their hearts. When the ship's engines failed 3 years ago, I used my fellowship money to cover the repair invoice. When Madison wanted a diving certification, I paid the training fees, even her travel costs. When our environmental compliance fine came through $48,000 for improper waste disposal, I was the one who quietly wired the amount from my grant's contingency fund. I told myself family was investment, that if I kept pouring in someday, I'd see interest. I realize now that I wasn't an investor. I was a donor, and they were the beneficiaries of my silence. I opened an old storage drive labeled Field Data. Inside were invoices, photos, scanned checks. I clicked through them like turning over stones. Proof of every moment they took and renamed. There it was. The photograph from the coral bleaching study, me in the background, cropped out of the press release that credited Madison Carter's leadership. I stared at it until the anger cooled into analysis. That's when I started to see the pattern. Every time I succeeded, they rewrote it. Each act of erasure came dressed as a compliment. You're better behind the scenes, Emily. You're not made for the spotlight. You're the quiet strength that holds us together. Translation: stay small, stay safe, stay invisible. I leaned back in the chair and thought about something I once read in a psychology paper. Families are systems, and systems protect their balance. When one person grows differently, the system attacks the deviation. It calls it rebellion, selfishness, or betrayal. But really it's fear. Fear of evolution. That was us. They weren't afraid of losing me. They were afraid of what it would mean if I didn't need them. The realization didn't hurt. It clarified. I finally understood that my empathy had been dangerous to them. I didn't fight their rules because I saw their pain, and they used that against me. They built a cage out of politeness and named it loyalty. My laptop pinged a notification from an academic news aggregator. Headline: Carter Marine Foundation wins award for innovative coral monitoring method. My eyes froze on the photo. Madison, again, standing next to a display of equipment I'd designed. The article quoted her describing the process in words I'd written in my thesis. I laughed quietly, a single bitter sound. Innovative. They even stole the adjectives. I clicked the contact link and found the public email for the award committee. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, not out of hesitation, but choice. I wasn't ready to expose them yet, not without everything in order. Instead, I opened the foundation's internal portal. Years of data files, financial statements. I began downloading copies, labeling them neatly by year. Each click echoed like a heartbeat. Anger wasn't emotion now. It was logistics. Still, beneath the precision, a small ache stirred. Not for them, but for me, the version of me who believed that being good, being quiet, would keep me safe. I could almost see her sitting across from me, tired and hopeful. I wanted to tell her, you weren't weak. You were surviving in their weather. That's the psychology of familial erasure. They make you feel responsible for your own disappearance. They convince you that being invisible is a choice you made. Not anymore. I opened another folder, labeled Legacy Press. Photos, speeches, awards, all rewritten histories. I scrolled through until I found one of my grandfather, Thomas Carter Sr., standing beside me when I was 10. We were holding a small glass tank filled with baby jellyfish glowing under the lab lights. His face was proud, mine curious. The caption below read, Thomas and Madison Carter, 3 generations of ocean vision. 3 generations. Only they'd cut me out. I closed my eyes and felt the old warmth of his hand on my shoulder. He had called me his little scientist, the only one who listened to the ocean instead of performing for it. That was the moment something shifted again. The fury sharpened into focus. This wasn't about recognition anymore. It was about correction. I pushed the chair back, stood, and started a new document, restoration plan. Not for coral, not for ecosystems, but for truth. I listed everything I needed to find the full financial records archived, emails, the original grants tied to my grandfather's name. If they'd buried me under paperwork, I would dig my way out through the same paper. Outside, the tide was rising. The boats knocked softly against their moorings, a rhythm like persistence. The sky had turned from silver to pale blue. I whispered mostly to the water. You saw me, you always did. And as the first sunlight hit the surface, I began the excavation of my own history, one file, one fact, one lie at a time. Richard's office smelled like old wood and older secrets. He sat across from me, spectacles low on his nose, eyes steady the way only someone who's seen too much betrayal can be. You're sure you want to dig this deep? He asked. I nodded. I'm done living on their version of truth. He gave a slow sigh and turned his monitor toward me. Then you should see this. Rows of emails filled the screen, time-stamped from 2 years ago, the year my grandfather Thomas Carter Sr. died. They weren't ordinary. Every message was addressed to me. Every single one. Subject lines like, need to see you, kiddo, and urgent, before the board meets. My heart pounded, even though I didn't want it to. I never got these, I whispered. Richard clicked a tab. They were intercepted. Your parents' IT administrator rerouted them to a secondary archive. They told him it was for privacy reasons. I read the messages in silence. Each one a fragment of a voice I'd been told was gone too soon to call for me. My grandfather had wanted to see me. He'd asked me to take over the Foundation's research division, not Madison. His words were warm, sometimes confused by medication, but clear. You were always the one who listened to the ocean. Em, don't let them take that away. I closed my eyes and felt the sting, not of grief, but of clarity. They told me he didn't want visitors, I said softly, that he was too sick to talk. Richard's tone hardened. They wanted you isolated. You were a threat to their narrative. He wasn't senile. He was trying to rewrite the will. These emails prove intent. Intent. The legal word for love with paperwork. I stared at the screen until the text blurred. Betrayal doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers in polite sentences signed with love. The next document Richard opened was worse. A set of family group emails weeks after the funeral. My mother writing to the board, Emily's not stable. She's overwhelmed. Don't involve her in upcoming decisions. Attached a photo of me from years ago, eyes red from exhaustion, cropped to look like breakdown. I felt my breath tighten. They called me unstable, I murmured, to protect their stability. Richard met my eyes. They didn't just steal from you, Emily. They stole your reputation. But this, he tapped the screen, this can undo that. For a long time I didn't speak. The air between us was thick, heavy with old lies finally surfacing. Then in a calm voice that didn't feel like mine, I said, "Then we build a case." He nodded. "I'll start drafting a preliminary claim. We'll need proof of the reroute technical forensics signatures timestamps." "I'll get them," I said. Everything they tried to bury. When I stepped outside, the wind was cold and exact. It carried the taste of salt and inevitability. My phone buzzed again, a text from my mother. "Please stop this. We can talk." Another from Madison. "You're embarrassing yourself." I didn't reply. They weren't afraid of embarrassment. They were afraid of exposure. That night, I sat by the window with my laptop open, scrolling through social media. My mother had posted a smiling photo captioned, "Family is everything. Grateful for loyalty and love." The comments were full of praise. What a beautiful family. So inspiring. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I copied the post link and pasted it into my notes under a heading, Public Image versus Reality. Anger had become a tool now, steady, precise, useful. I didn't need to shout. I just needed to record. The next morning, Richard called again. "I found something else," he said. "A buried folder in the Foundation's backup. It's labeled Legacy." My pulse picked up. "Send it?" Minutes later, the files downloaded scanned documents, signed transfers, legal memos. One stood out. Change of asset designation, Carter Marine Vessel Endeavor. My grandfather's name beside mine. Except where it should have read Emily Carter, someone had written Madison Carter. The signature didn't match, not even close. Forgery. I sat back, staring at the document as the morning light bled across the floor. This wasn't family politics anymore. This was crime. I whispered the words to myself like a promise. They didn't just lie. They forged legacy. Outside gulls screamed over the harbor, sharp, raw, alive. The kind of sound you can't unhear once you've recognized it. By noon, I was in motion again. Quiet, efficient, unstoppable. They had rewritten my history once. I would write it back line by line, evidence by evidence, until truth stood taller than their lies. Anger wasn't the fuel anymore. Justice was. And I was done being quiet. The sky darkened by the time Richard called me back. "You need to come to the archives," he said. "Now." The Carter Marine Archives sat 3 floors below the main office temperature, controlled quiet, sealed behind glass like a tomb. Richard was already there, sleeves rolled up, papers spread out across the table. His expression was somewhere between awe and anger. He handed me a file folder stamped Property Transfer Confidential. Inside was a legal deed. The ownership of the research vessel Endeavour, my grandfather's pride, the ship that bore his initials on its stern, was listed under one name, Emily Rose Carter, dated 2 weeks before his death, signed by him, witnessed, notarized, official. Emily Richards said quietly, "This is it, the original, not the forged copy." I touched the paper. The ink looked slightly faded, but the signature, his real signature, was steady, familiar. The same looping script I'd seen on the letters he used to write me as a kid. Inside the same folder was a letter sealed in a smaller envelope. My name written in his hand. My throat went dry. Richard gave a slight nod. "You should read it." I broke the seal. The smell of old paper hit me first. Then the words. "My dearest Emily, if you are reading this, it means the others have already begun rewriting what was never theirs. You were always the one who listened to the water, to the truth beneath it. I trust you to protect what I built, not because of your name, but because you never used it as a weapon. The Endeavour is yours. Use it to study, to teach, to build something that cannot be bought or sold. The ocean rewards patience and punishes pretense. Remember that." I folded the letter carefully, as if folding my heartbeat with it. For a moment I didn't speak. Then I said he knew. Richard nodded. He did, and he left proof. The door burst open. My father's voice filled the room before his shadow did. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Emily?" Behind him, Madison, face flushed, and my mother pale, but composed as if she'd just walked off a charity stage. I stood still, holding the letter at my side. "I'm reading the truth," I said. My father's jaw tightened. "You had no right to be here." "The archives are under the foundation," Richard replied calmly. "And as of this document, he tapped the deed Emily has every right." Madison's eyes darted to the letter in my hand. "You forged that," she spat. "You've always been jealous." I turned toward her. Funny. That's what people say when they run out of facts. My mother stepped forward, her voice trembling with practiced empathy. "Emily, sweetheart, don't do this. We can fix this quietly." "There's no quiet left," I said. "You made sure of that when you rewrote my grandfather's will and erased his calls. He wanted me here. You blocked every message." My father slammed his fist against the table. "You don't understand the damage you're causing." I met his glare evenly. "No, I understand it perfectly. I just stopped volunteering for it." Madison's voice cracked. "That ship is mine," Grandpa said. I cut her off, sliding the letter across the table toward them. "Read it. He said the Endeavour is mine. Signed, witnessed, and now public record." Thunder cracked outside as if the sky wanted to testify. My mother turned to Richard. "You can't let her do this." Richard's voice was even. "Mrs. Carter, my duty is to my client. And right now, that's Emily." The silence that followed was a living thing, heavy, wet, electric. My father's face reddened. My mother's composure fractured. Madison looked like a drowning person, realizing the tide wasn't going to change for her. Then the shouting started, my father accusing. Madison sobbing, my mother whispering my name like a warning. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just said, "This isn't revenge. It's correction." They stared as if the word itself carried a sentence. The lights flickered with the storm outside. Rain streaked across the glass wall, wind moaning against the building. The ocean had begun to churn. Fitting, I thought. The truth always did when it finally broke surface. Eleanor arrived, then my grandmother, her cane tapping softly against the floor. She looked smaller than I remembered, but her eyes were bright sharp as ever. "I see you've all gathered," she said, her voice calm but cutting. "Thomas warned me this day would come." My father turned, almost pleading. "Mother, please." But she held up a hand. "Don't. I watched you twist his words. I watched you exile the only grandchild who reminded him of himself." My mother started crying quietly, a sound like performance more than grief. Madison covered her face. Eleanor turned to me. "Emily, child, do you have it?" I handed her the letter. She scanned it, slowly nodded once, and placed it in front of them like a verdict. Then it settled. The endeavor belongs to her. Thomas's word is final. The room cracked open with thunder again, this time closer, loud enough to rattle the light fixtures. My father took a step back, shaking his head. "You can't just take everything from us." I looked at him and said quietly, "You already did." No one spoke after that. Only the rain filled the silence. Outside the window, the Endeavor rocked gently in her berth, her lights gleaming through the storm like truth refusing to drown. The storm hadn't stopped by morning. The ocean was still rough, gray water thrashing against the pier like an animal finally freed. I stood at the edge of the dock with my coat collar turned up, watching the Endeavor pull at her ropes. She wanted to move. So did I. Behind me, footsteps echoed on wet planks measured deliberate. My father's voice came first, low and tired. "Emily, I didn't turn around. You shouldn't be here. We need to talk." His tone had softened, but it wasn't remorse. It was calculation, an old habit dressed as humility. My mother's perfume arrived before her words. "Please, Emily. The board is panicking. The donors are discovering the truth," I said, cutting her off. "Maybe for the first time." Madison came next, her eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. She looked smaller, without her confidence, fragile in the rain. "You don't have to do this," she said. "We can still fix it." I turned, then slowly, meeting each of their faces. "You think this is about fixing reputation? It's not. It's about ending inheritance of rot." My father's expression hardened. "You've made your point, but without our signatures, the lab funding stops. The vessel can't operate." Before I could answer, another voice joined from the shadows near the marina office. "That's not true," Eleanor said, stepping forward with a folded document in hand. "Thomas set up a contingency fund years ago. In Emily's name. She doesn't need a cent from you." My father's mask cracked just slightly. "Mother, you don't understand what she's doing." Eleanor's tone was steady, almost reverent. "I understand perfectly. She's honoring your father better than you ever did." The rain thickened, drumming against the dock. I could see the realization dawning on them that their control was dissolving faster than the ink on the papers they'd forged. My mother reached for me, her hand trembling. "Emily, sweetheart, think about what you're throwing away." I stepped back. "You mean what I'm reclaiming." Madison's voice broke. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. You don't understand what it's like to live under their expectations." For a brief second, I saw the sister. She could have been just a girl trying to survive applause she never earned. But pity is a debt, and I was done paying. "You made your choice," I said softly. "You helped them erase me. Now you can live in what you built." Lightning flashed behind them, white and merciless. Eleanor moved beside me, her hand finding mine. "Your grandfather said legacy isn't wealth, it's belief." She squeezed gently. "He believed in you, Emily. That's all that ever mattered." My father looked from her to me, desperation creeping into his voice. "Please, we're losing everything. Do something for your sister." I turned fully to face him. "I already did. I stopped her from becoming you." The silence that followed was absolute. I stepped forward and handed Richard's finalized document to him, an eviction notice termination of their rights within the foundation. Calm, factual, lethal. "Take it," I said. "It's over." My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. My mother cried quietly. Madison just stared at the ground, rain dripping from her hair. "I didn't erase you," I said evenly. "You erased yourselves when you chose deceit over truth." Then I turned away, walking down the dock toward the Endeavor. The ropes creaked as I untied them, one by one. Behind me, my father called out, voice cracking through the storm, "You can't just leave." I looked back over my shoulder. "Watch me." The engine started with a low hum, the vibration deep in my bones. Thunder rolled across the horizon as I guided the vessel out of the harbor. Rain lashed the deck wind, tearing at my hair, but I felt nothing but calm. They stood on the pier, 3 silhouettes, shrinking in the distance, powerless for the first time. As the boat cleared the last buoy, I whispered to the waves, "You silenced me for years. Now listen, the ocean doesn't need your permission to rise." Lightning split the sky. The water surged forward, unstoppable. I didn't look back again. By the time the coastline disappeared, the storm had eased, replaced by steady rain and the slow rhythm of freedom. The Endeavor cut through the gray like a blade heading toward open water, toward something that finally felt like peace. Justice wasn't loud. It was quiet, relentless, and complete. 6 years later, the water was calm. The Endeavor floated in the same harbor where everything had once ended. Only now it gleamed with fresh paint and purpose. The name across her hull read Carter Marine Institute. The decks buzzed with life students unloading equipment, researchers logging samples, laughter cutting through the hum of engines. The ghosts had gone quiet. Every morning I walked the dock with a cup of black coffee touching the rail as if greeting an old friend. I no longer worked in boardrooms or battles. I worked in tide charts, coral data, and the kind of silence that builds things. Madison came twice a year. She didn't wear diamonds anymore. She didn't announce herself. She'd just appear in the doorway of the lab holding a box of notebooks for the summer camp kids. The first time she returned, she said nothing for an hour, just watched the children tinkering with microscopes. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "He always knew who you were." I nodded. He knew who we both were. We just played different roles in the same lie. She didn't argue. She never did after that. Now she teaches the kids how to speak their ideas clearly, how to stand tall when presenting. It's ironic she became the voice for the children who were once invisible. Maybe that's redemption. Maybe it's just repair. Eleanor still lives nearby in the small apartment I built off the main lab. Every morning she waves from her window as I walk past. Her health is slower now, but her eyes still have that same stormlight, sharp, steady, undefeated. The Institute thrives. 27 scientists, dozens of community volunteers, and partnerships that reach as far as Chile and Indonesia. We've helped rebuild reefs, trained farmers, and given scholarships to students who were told they weren't the right fit. I see parts of my younger self in every one of them, quiet questioning waiting to be seen. The last module of my life came in the form of a letter. I wrote it for the ones who were never chosen. If you've ever been the quiet one at the back of the room, listening harder than you speak, this is for you. If you've ever been called too sensitive, too distant, too complicated, this is for you. You weren't hard to love. They were too afraid to see what love looks like when it doesn't obey. The tide always returns. I keep my grandfather's compass on the bridge. Its glass is scratched, the brass dulled, but it still points true. Beneath it, taped to the console, are his words in his own handwriting for the dreamers who invest in those the world overlooks. Some days, when the sun rises over the water, I trace those words with my thumb. The horizon glows gold like forgiveness. I still hear the waves hitting the hull, the low hum of engines, the faint laughter of the new generation, building what we never had. Legacy isn't measured in inheritance. It's measured in what you leave standing when everyone else has walked away. I look out over the open sea, the compass warm in my hand, and whisper, "You were right, Grandpa. The ocean doesn't forget." If you've ever rebuilt yourself after being erased, share this story. Let's remind the world that silence isn't surrender. It's strength waiting for the right moment to rise.